Welcome to This Explainer. Let's get right into it, shall we? Today, we're unpacking a highly relatable and, let's be honest, pretty emotionally charged challenge that almost every parent, coach, or caregiver is going to face at some point. We're talking about helping a child process a loss. Drawing directly from a really thoughtful guide on post-competition conversations, we're going to break down exactly how you can navigate those tricky, delicate moments right after a disappointing result. Whether it's a dance competition, a sporting event, or literally any competitive arena, we're going to explore how the way you handle these conversations shapes not just their resilience, but their actual desire to keep trying. So, set the scene with me for a second. The competition is over, the scores are in, and your child didn't win. What happens when the music stops and the tears start? Whether they stumbled in the routine or actually performed beautifully but just didn't get the score they were hoping for. Losing can trigger this sudden flood of raw disappointment, embarrassment, or even outright anger. It's an incredibly vulnerable moment, and how we, as caregivers, respond in these first few minutes is absolutely critical. Why? Because it literally shapes how the child interprets the very concept of losing. To navigate all of this, we've organized a step-by-step timeline, starting right where the emotions are at their absolute highest. Phase 1, the immediate aftermath. Now, when a child is hurting, our very first instinct as a caregiver is usually to just fix the pain, right? We want to make it better quickly. But jumping in to reassure them with a simple, "Oh, don't worry, it's okay," can actually sound incredibly dismissive to a kid whose emotions are completely raw. And this brilliantly illustrates the alternative. Start with validation. Saying something like, "That looked really important to you," acknowledges their reality right then and there, without rushing them out of their feelings. What's truly interesting here is that sometimes the absolute best thing you can say is nothing. Nothing at all. If your child wants to talk, listen without interrupting. Just let them vent. But if they don't want to talk, don't force it. Offer a calm, quiet presence. You can just sit nearby and give them some physical space, while still ensuring they feel connected and fully supported by you. Once that initial wave of shock begins to subside, we enter phase 2, identity versus the outcome. The crucial goal here is making a really hard distinction between a temporary result and a permanent identity. The anchor of this entire philosophy is this simple thought. The score was one part of the competition, but it doesn't decide who you are. You see, a bad score just makes them a competitor who happened to lose today. It doesn't make them a loser. You achieve this shift by pointing your focus toward what genuinely matters in dance, in sports, and frankly, in life. The scoreboard is temporary, right? But the treats they're building, those are permanent. So use this time to reinforce their discipline, the teamwork they showed, their sheer courage to step out there and try in the first place, and their ability to keep going even after a setback. You're basically reminding them of their inherent value beyond the medals. This brings us to the more analytical part of our timeline, phase 3, asking better questions. The quality of their reflection depends entirely on the quality of the questions you ask them. Instead of just collecting feelings, asking closed questions like, "Were you upset?" or "Are you sad?" you really want to invite deeper reflection. Ask questions that prompt them to think critically but kindly about their performance. Things like, "What part felt hardest today?" or "What did you do that you're actually proud of?" Or even, "If you could redo just one thing, what would you change?" This completely shifts their brain from panic mode straight into learning mode. Of course, you have to read the room here and tailor your approach to your child's age. If you're dealing with younger kids, keep it incredibly concrete and short. Max out at 2 questions so you don't overwhelm them. Seriously, 2 is plenty. But for older kids, you've got the runway to go a bit deeper. You can ask questions that connect their daily effort to their future improvement. Something like, "What practice habit do you think would help you the most next time?" Okay, so when their emotions have truly settled down, we can pivot to the future. Phase 4, turning feedback into action. Let's dive into this framework because it is incredibly effective for structuring feedback without completely crushing their spirit. It's called the keep, tweak, try next method. First, keep. Identify a strength they demonstrated today. Maybe it was great timing or really strong expressions. Second, tweak. Pick just one single improvement area to work on. Avoid giving them a huge laundry list of flaws. And third, try next. Agree on a small, specific practice experiment they can do before the very next event. By breaking it down into these 3 simple steps, you give the child a real sense of agency and dramatically reduce that heavy feeling of being overwhelmed by failure. Action plans are great, for sure, but they need the right fuel to keep going. That brings us to phase 5, focusing on effort and emotion. It is so tempting to only praise outcomes, right? Saying things like, you were great because you won. But it's absolutely vital to use effort language instead. Try saying things like, I saw you rehearse even when it was exhausting, or you handled your nerves and finished strong. By highlighting their effort, you're teaching them that improvement is earned, step by step. We really need to celebrate the milestones that go way beyond medals. Things like simply showing up, working through a mistake on stage, practicing consistently all week, or even just supporting their teammates. But let's be totally realistic for a second. Even with the absolute best support in the world, a child might still be visibly upset after a loss. And in those moments, it's time to coach emotional regulation, not just performance. Give them immediate tools they can actually use. Depending on their age, you can model slow breathing, guide them through a simple grounding routine, like having them name 5 things you can see around you right now, or honestly, just take a quiet walk together. Remind them that tears are just a signal that something mattered to them. Crying is definitely not a sign of failure. Finally, we reach the end of our timeline, phase 6, deciding what happens next. Losing really strips away a feeling of control, so the best thing you can do is give them choices to help restore that control. Ask them what they want to do next. Do they want to keep training as usual? Do they want to switch up a part of their routine? Or do they just need to take a short, scheduled break before regrouping? The key takeaway here is that even if you, as the caregiver, strongly prefer that they jump right back in and continue, letting them actively participate in this decision is what actually builds their long-term resilience and their sense of ownership over their own activities. But what if you do all of this and they still look at you and say, I want to quit? Well, the guide advises taking this seriously, but without panicking. Acknowledge their pain by saying, that makes sense, you're hurting right now. A temporary pause with a clear plan is far healthier than forcing a kid to push through resentment. But instead of just letting it end there, you can leave the door open by asking them one incredibly powerful question to reflect on. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I leave you to consider how you might use this with your own kids. When the loss is fresh and the urge to quit is strong, ask them, what would you need to feel okay about trying again?